Wow. Sheena Ren, a fourth-year university student, is enjoying a short vacation before starting her job search. He has loved swords and magic since childhood, willing to stay up all night just to complete a story with such a theme. Currently, he has just completed the newly released game, titled The Legend of the Seven Heroes, Part 2 in the hit RPG series. This is a familiar story about the children of the heroes who defeated the Demon King. In Part 2, the main character's close friend killed another friend, a saint, and this unexpected action caused chaos in the kingdom. The king orders the main character to kill that friend. The story will continue to unfold in Part 3. Ren read the ending line of the game, checking to see if anyone else had completed the game. He discovered that the main character's friend was actually the mastermind from beginning to end. He didn't mind anyway, just thinking about playing again to discover some hidden skill. But before he could restart, a notification appeared, asking if he wanted to start the special story with the Demon Sword summoning skill. Ren doesn't remember which character has that skill. But regardless, he pressed yes, and then he was stunned. As he was surrounded by bright light, when he woke up, he saw the face of an unfamiliar older woman talking to another woman. Ren finds himself transported into the game and becomes one of the characters there. At first, he couldn't believe it, but the fact that his body could not move or see clearly proved that he was now an infant. Is this the special story that the game mentioned? Before he could think further, the old woman picked him up and asked who he guessed was his mother. About your name. The young woman held him in her arms, smiled, and said she would name him Len Ashton. Ren burst into tears. That name he could never forget. It was the reason behind all the chaos in the game. Len Ashton, the former best friend, betrayed the main character. Ren couldn't believe that he would now have to live as one of the suspected masterminds behind everything in the game. Even though your names and Len Ashton's name sound similar, Ren doesn't believe he has anything in common with that character. Time passes quickly. 7 years have passed since he crossed over. Ren, now Len Ashton, is busy practicing swordplay with his father. The old man quickly knocked him to the ground. His father warned him not to reveal any loopholes to the enemy. Even though I'm lying flat on the ground, Len is still praised by his father for his ability to move flexibly, especially for a 7-year-old child. However, young Len was almost exhausted after practice. It was spring, their small village, an unnamed village in the 𝑁𝒂𝓗 Empire, a military nation located in the western part of the Elfin continent, filled with warm air. Looking back, Len still finds it difficult to accept what happened to him, especially having to live all over again as a newborn. But because he was reborn like that, he easily adapted and comfortably immersed himself in eating and sleeping every time his mother lulled him to sleep. What no one knows is that Len not only retained his memories, but he also has the ability to see everyone's status boards. However, he could not see his own status panel, which was completely different from in the game. However, what bothered him the most was the demon sword summoning skill. It is true that in the game there are some hidden skills. Even in the second playthrough, the player can combine several existing skills to create new skills. Of course, there are also unique skills that are only available to a few people. But as far as he remembered, there was absolutely no skill called demon sword summoning. In your case, Len can actually summon the demon sword, even though it's still quite small right now. According to the notification on his bracelet, the skill to summon demonic swords will grow as he grows. In addition, he is also capable of using natural magical attacks to a small extent. This skill also allows him to increase the number of sword demons he can summon. Currently, he possesses the wood attribute magic sword. However, Len also has to practice his magic carefully. If he practices too much, he will run out of magical energy and suffer severe headaches. Len secretly practiced his sword demon summoning skill alone, just like now, until his father suddenly burst into the room to hug him. The fact that he possesses this power only confirms that this world is closely related to the game. That also means he must do everything he can to avoid the dark future he knows. That's why Len decided to start practicing magic early, both to protect himself and to learn more about this world. Len spent peaceful days helping his parents on their small farm. When he was 7 years old, his father suggested that he start practicing swordsmanship with a wooden sword. During the first training session, Len was the one to strike first, but was easily dismissed by his father. Although still just a child, Len was surprised to realize his current body. He has amazing strength. However, that strength was still not enough for him to defeat his father. Len only lasted less than 10 minutes during the match. Still, his father praised him and told him they would continue when he regained his strength. As soon as his father was out of sight, Len checked the notifications, and he found that his skills had increased by using the wood attribute magic sword. From then on, he continued to maintain his daily routine, studying theory in the morning and practicing swordsmanship in the afternoon. Unlike in the game, Len cannot easily level up by collecting magic stones from flying monsters. His father once gave him a magic stone when he was young, but because it wasn't something he hunted himself, the skill or status message didn't react at all. They continued to practice, and just like that, another month passed. Father Len noticed that he had improved a lot in a short time, but he also pointed out that you need to improve your balance. Then his father threw him to the ground to illustrate his teachings. Even though he wanted to practice more, his father advised him to rest and reminded him just making a steady effort every day is enough. He smiled, said that Len would do very well, and left. As soon as Dad left, Len immediately checked his status. He realized that there was only a little more left before the demon sword summoning skill could level up. Far from playing games, leveling up in this world is much more difficult. Every day, his skill only increased by about 2 points. Although tired, Len began to enjoy this life, because things are getting more and more interesting. That night, Len's mother commented on the blisters and calluses on his hands. She said that perhaps Len's father was pushing him too hard. Len reassured his mother that he wanted to do so, then asked her if she hated swords. She replied that she was afraid of swords, and she remembered the last time when her husband was fascinated with swordsmanship. When he was young, he not only protected her from many monsters, but she couldn't help but worry if his courage would become a curse. What if he gets injured because of it? Just thinking about it made her uneasy, but she also understood that his strength was no joke. Father Len continued to hunt many monsters, bringing in a steady source of income. Monster meat can also be shared with villagers, benefiting everyone. At that moment, Len's father walked in and reassured his mother not to worry because he was very strong. He promised not to be defeated by monsters in the village, and unlike before, he was no longer so careless. He says family is his top priority. When Len lay down in bed that night, he couldn't help but think about his family. In his previous life, his parents divorced, and he lives with his mother. As time passed, their conversations became shorter and shorter, until finally they no longer said a word to each other. His mother never returned home either. Len feels grateful that he can go to college, and he tried to understand that his mother also went through her own difficulties during that time. When 3 people live together, everything is so peaceful, with Len doing housework and practice every day. Compared to the previous life, his current life is completely different, but Len feels satisfied. One day after practice, Len lost again to his father in the match. His father suggested resting and continuing tomorrow. When I stood up, Len felt something was different. His body suddenly felt light, and he quickly took a fighting stance. He rushed towards his father. The father was able to stop him, but he was surprised why Len was so fast. Not only that, his strength is also much stronger than before. Len continues to attack his father. He realized that his speed and strength were increasing, leaving his father unable to defend himself from his attacks. Len will probably continue, if not father's sword was broken. Finally, the father realized what was happening. He hugged Len in his arms and realized that his son is a skill carrier. Just then, his mother, 𝑀𝒶𝓈𝓉𝒛, walked in and curiously asked what was going on, and at that moment, his father explained to her. Len also noticed that the next level of his physical abilities had been activated. But more importantly, his father is now even more determined to take him to the capital to make a name for himself as a knight. His parents were now very excited about this new discovery and even wanted to go to church to test his skills if they had enough money. Len isn't too keen on this idea and says that as long as his skills don't kill him, it's okay to not know what his skills are. When they heard him say that, his parents could only frown and look at him. Don't children often rejoice when they discover a new skill? But Len was still determined not to go through this. Who would have heard of the demon sword summoning skill? You'd rather stay away from these troubles, and if possible, he just wanted to live a peaceful life in the village. If there's anything Len wants to do, it's to become his father's successor in the village, so they can hunt monsters together. If their income increases, they can help the village grow more prosperous. Not only that, if the situation worsens, Len can also protect his father. This surprised his mother. During the past 7 years, Len has lived the happiest life he has ever had, and it's all thanks to your parents. Deep inside, Len knows that he can no longer live like Sheena Wren, which is now Len Ashton. That's why he wants his parents to be able to live a long life together. Both his father and mother were touched by his words and ended the conversation with a hug. For Len, this is his second time playing, so he resolved to cherish everything to prevent a future full of despair. He will live a different life than Len in the game, but he did not expect that his dream would be extinguished over the next few years, because in the future you will meet a girl you shouldn't have met. It was the girl he had to kill. In the northern city of 𝒾𝓃𝒃, a beautiful young woman sat alone in the garden, sighing heavily. 𝑉𝒽𝒽, the leader of the night patrol, approached her and asked if anything was wrong. The girl replied that she was bored with practice. The old knight looked at the fallen men before him. The old knight commented that even his soldiers were no longer enough to be her sword training opponents. At this moment, the girl realized the more important thing that 𝑉𝒽𝒽 did. Because she noticed the armor he was wearing, he replied that he had been ordered to patrol the northwest area of the territory, and he needed to destroy a monster that was causing trouble. Back in Len's village, life is as peaceful as ever. Len realized that 3 years had passed since he leveled up, as he was now level 2. Now, Len can see the effects of level 3, but the next level up is still too far away, especially when he only had 659 points while it took 15 points to level up. In fact, there were days when he couldn't practice swordplay because he had to help out in the fields, especially when winter was approaching. He just discovered that practicing for a short period of time reduces his score slightly, but with his current score, it is enough to help him have enough fighting strength to live peacefully in his small village. One of the village elders greeted Len, talking about how his father always boasted about him, and that he would become one of the great knights in the capital one day. Speaking of the capital, a group of knights suddenly appeared. The older woman told Len that they should go home. These knights belonged to Lord Baron's men. They headed straight for Ashton's house, where 𝑉𝒽𝒽 talked to his father, holding a letter. 𝑉𝒽𝒽 apologizes for the unexpected appearance, and Len's father asks what they are doing in the suburbs. Len knew that the Lord was the ruler of their territory, and every knight must report to the higher nobles. His father was one of the knights assigned to protect the village. During his time in this world, this was the first time Len saw an armored knight. Len's father read the letter with a frown on his face, asking 𝑉𝒽𝒽 if the monster had actually caused damage in the area. The elder knight confirmed, adding that several villages had been attacked and there were casualties according to witnesses. The monster is a small monster that moves as fast as the wind. Therefore, 𝑉𝒽𝒽 and his team patrolled the area, looking for opportunities to destroy monsters. However, they still haven't had any luck. 𝑉𝒽𝒽 asked Len's father to join the vigilante team. Father Len only asked what rank this monster belonged to. 𝑉𝒽𝒽 speculates that it is at least D level. Speaking of ranks, the organization has created a system that ranks monsters based on how dangerous they are, with S being the highest level and G being the lowest. If the monster around the village was D rank, then it was on par with the boss in the early stages of the game. Despite the large number of knights, the monster was still not defeated. But back to the main issue, Len's father asked why such a mid-level monster appeared in this area, when only F-level monsters appeared in their territory. 𝑉𝒽𝒽 also didn't know the reason, so they planned to recruit some more knights from the nearby village to increase security. However, because the patrol scope is so wide, it will take about 20 days for reinforcements to arrive. The elderly knight apologized for the inconvenience, and he asked Len's father to wait patiently until then. Given the current situation, Len's father had no choice but to accept the mission. While they were busy discussing, Len listened attentively and wondered what the monster's name was. If he knew the name, he might have some understanding of it, based on his memory from the game. 𝑉𝒽𝒽 and Len's father finally ended their conversation. When he realized Len was asking him, 𝑉𝒽𝒽 immediately confirmed that he was his son, right? Len's father immediately told him to greet the captain of the knights. 𝑉𝒽𝒽 and his team stayed for a while, enjoying the hospitality of the Ashton family, before leaving for the day. As the knights left, they couldn't help but comment on how the 10-year-old boy, Len, was the same age as their young lady. And they are also very curious about him because Len is a person who possesses special skills. If it were 𝑉𝒽𝒽, he would have wanted to test Len's swordsmanship skills right at Ashton's house. Len's father said they'll be busy from now on, but when Len wanted to see the letter from 𝑉𝒽𝒽, his father said there was no need to worry. He would hunt the D-rank monster himself. In fact, he had hunted it a year ago before Len was born. Len was very surprised to hear that, but it also explained why he always lost to his father in fencing practice sessions. Since then, Len's father never stopped hunting. He brought back a large batch of wild boar. He planned to increase the number of hunts per day because wild boars were a popular hunting target, even among other monsters. Len understood his father's plan. The father wanted to reduce the number of prey so that wild monsters would not come close to their area, and this would help the soldiers easily track the monsters thanks to the few footprints and animal feces. Len's father continued hunting, but unlike before when he only hunted in the morning, now he starts hunting in the evening, until sunset. One night while they were bathing together, Len noticed bruises on his father's body. He said that maybe his father was working too hard. Len asked his father if he could help him hunt, but his father said he could do so after the matter with the monster was resolved. Len's father also apologized for not being able to train with him, but Len didn't mind because he was also busy helping his mother take care of the wild boars his father hunted. Although his father seemed calm about this, Len couldn't help but worry because he didn't want anything to happen and disturb his peaceful life. Life still passes like that. Until the 10th day, when something else happened. Len realizes that his father has not returned yet. So his mother suggested going to find him. Len said he would go with him, but his mother objected because she thought it was too dangerous. Hearing that, Len couldn't help but raise his voice, pointing out that it would be more dangerous if his mother went alone, and he would go no matter how much she stopped him. Seeing his mother's scared expression, Len remembered a conversation a few years ago about her mother's worries about her father's safety. Finally, both mother and son decided to set out to find their father. They kept walking until they reached the bridge leading into the forest. A river separates the forest and their village. As they began to cross the bridge, Len felt his eyes gradually adjust to the darkness, and soon they discovered their father sitting by a tree near the other end of the bridge. They were overjoyed to see him, but also felt like something was wrong. Len's mother quickly ran to his side, and Len had to follow behind. And that's when they saw Len's father seriously injured. He bled profusely. Bright moonlight shines around. When Len and his mother worried and took care of his father, suddenly he heard a noise nearby. Made him turn around and look. Suddenly, a wild boar appeared from nowhere. The wild boar rushed straight towards Len. He promptly stopped the wild boar with his sword, and he struggled with the beast, pressing down on him until his mother hit the pig. At that moment, Len saw a movement from behind. 2 other wild boars were approaching them. Len was surprised to discover that he could repel them, realized that it was the result of leveling up. He quickly pushed the pig away, and he rushed towards the 3rd one. When the 3rd wild boar aimed straight at his mother, Len slashed the wild boar with his sword, and he was surprised when it was destroyed with just 1 slash. When he slashed the remaining pig, the 3rd one did not continue to attack. That wild boar ran away. All Len could think about, I'm stronger now, thanks to all the training sessions with my father. Len and his mother rushed his father home, spending all night for Mrs. Rig to treat his wound. The old woman told them that Len's father was still in an unstable condition, but at least his injuries had temporarily stabilized. His mother thanked them both, especially Len, who was determined to go out with her last night. As for Len, he still couldn't stop thinking, because there was no way his father would be defeated by weak wild boars. This means his father encountered a dangerous monster that you don't want. If so, the monster is still in the forest, and it would take another 10 days for reinforcements to arrive. Len couldn't help but think about the worst-case scenario. The monster invaded the village and attacked them. With that in mind, he began to figure out what he could do to help. Immediately, Len decided to return to the forest. He saw the monsters he defeated last night. Luckily, they weren't eaten by other animals, so Len thought maybe he should bring them home before the other animals arrived. Suddenly, torch-like lights flashed from the corpses of the monsters, and the lights were like torches drawn into his bracelet. It increases monster sword summoning skill, and wooden monster sword by 2 points. This confirms Len's initial thoughts. The bracelet only absorbs monster stones in the monster's body if he is the one hunting them. Len brought the boar's body home with plans that night. He told his mother that he would replace his father and take on the job of protecting the village. Before his mother could speak, Len said before that he understood the danger. But as long as you are a member of the Ashton family, protecting the village is also your responsibility. His mother objected, saying he was still a child, but Len replied that he was the only one in the village who could fight against monsters when his father was injured. That's why he asked his mother to let him protect everyone, at least until reinforcements arrive. His mother understood that Len could not be argued with. So that night, she stayed up late sitting next to his father. The next morning, she agreed to let Len go, but on the condition that he return before dark. If you get lost, his mother told him to use 𝒮𝓝𝒾𝓃𝒾𝓃𝒹 rock, a tower-like rock in the forest, as a guide. Following mother's instructions, Len has found 𝒮𝓝𝒾𝓃𝒾𝓃 rock and recalled the power of wooden swords and natural magical properties. He remembered a strong boss in the game that could use natural magic. As if realizing Len's intention, he was immediately tested for that ability. A wild boar suddenly appeared, and the wild boar ran straight towards him. Len calmly pointed the tip of his sword at the monster. He recited a spell that covered the pig in magic. Then vines wrapped around it, hanging in midair. However, witnessed the monster struggling, making Len unable to defeat it immediately. In the end, he decided to end the battle with a fatal blow, finishing off the pig. Len couldn't believe that natural magic was so easy to use, and he was able to practice a lot that day by taking down an entire herd of wild boars. The villagers were very surprised to see him, young Len dragging his booty, which included 12 pigs. The next day, He hunted 12 more, and on the third day, the number of wild boars he hunted increased again. The fourth and fifth days were the same. Each day, the number of hunts increased. However, he still hadn't met the monster he wanted to find. Looking at his notification, Len realized he only needed to hunt 3 more pigs, was that he would be able to upgrade the upcoming Demon Sword of Metal skill, which made him feel more excited than ever. That evening, Len returned home, and he saw that Mrs. Rig was worried. She asked his mother to stand outside, because Len's father's condition is not good. Len quickly ran to Mrs. Rig's side and asked what happened. She explained that his father's condition had worsened at dusk. What was worse was that they had used up all the precious herbs they had, leaving him with only a fragile breath left. They couldn't understand why this happened. And tonight is the last time herbs can be used. At that time, Mrs. Rig asked 𝑀𝒶𝓈𝓉𝒃 to bring the recipe box to her house, telling her to ask her husband how to help. 𝑀𝒶𝓈𝓉𝒃 hurried out. Len asked Mrs. Rig if there was anything he could do, and about the herbs. With a sad expression, Ms. Rig said these herbs used to grow around the foot of Mount 𝒮𝓉𝒾𝓃𝒃, but they became extinct after a harsh winter several decades ago. Len saw a 5-pointed leaf on the table, and he asked if it was herbs. Mrs. Rig confirmed, and told him to wait outside the door because she needed to take care of his father. Len walked out and realized it was 𝒮𝓝 grass, one of the healing herbs he had used in the game. But is this herb really extinct? Len couldn't believe his eyes until he saw it with his own eyes. You know the forest at night is very dangerous. But if you don't do anything right now, your father will die. Finally, Len rushed into the forest. Ignore all the strange darkness. Run straight towards 𝒮𝓉𝒾𝓃 rock. Upon arrival, he immediately searched around for 𝒮𝓝 grass, but didn't see it. Len didn't give up, wondering if there was still grass at the top. He began to climb to the top of the mountain, thanks to natural magic. After a long time, he finally reached the top, and ahead is a 𝒮𝓝 grass field. Len quickly spit out a lot and stuffed it into his pocket in the hope that this herb would save his father. At that moment, he discovered bones on the ground. Boar bones. He wondered why they were here, so high up. But looking closely, he realized that there were not only pig bones, but also some jewelry. Made him shiver. Len quickly rushed down, feeling uneasy about this place. He started running home, but suddenly encountered 3 wild boars. Even the monsters were startled by his appearance. But Len quickly destroyed them in just 3 sword strikes. At that moment, he realized something was wrong. The wild boars seemed afraid of something, as if they were trying to escape. Len felt a presence behind him, and when he turned to look, he saw the familiar silhouette of the monster that you wanted to avoid. It was a D-rank special monster, 𝒶𝓃. The giant monster rose above everything, roaring loudly. 𝒶𝓃 is a powerful monster, ranked first among D-rank monsters. Instead of waiting for it to attack, Len decided to run away. Looked back in time to avoid the monster's jaws. Len landed on a nearby tree trunk, but even the monster quickly sank its teeth into it, with Len just barely avoiding the bite of its breath. He admitted to himself that this wolf was much more agile than him, but that's not the worst. 𝒶𝓃 is also famous for his ability to use wind magic thanks to his many tails. The monster attacks Len with wind magic. Luckily, Len's quick reflexes saved him narrowly. 𝒶𝓃 uses the wind power accumulated from his body to create invisible hands, using them to steal objects. In addition to the wind magic attack just now, Len knew clearly that this monster was too strong for his abilities. However, he was also aware that it would never let him escape. At this point, his only choice was to find a way to defeat it right here. Currently, the attack power of his natural magic was low, and there was no way for him to get close to the monster's belly to deal damage. But then he noticed a wound on one of the monster's 4 legs. Len suddenly realized that this wound could have been caused by his father. This also explains why his father was able to escape the monster last time. He thought perhaps the reason the monster hadn't attacked him yet was because it was still injured. Len's father fulfilled his role as a knight, and Len determined to follow suit. Suddenly, the air became stuffy. As 𝒶𝓃 releases a new wind attack, Len kept calm, and he used natural magic to block the attack, creating a buffer between him and the monster. He also uses magic to hold back the monster even for just a brief moment, before he rushed straight into it, and dealt a direct blow to 𝒶𝓃. Unfortunately, his wooden demon sword shattered, instead of dealing damage to the monster. This is terrible. Will he have enough time to summon the sword again? Len stepped back and tried to summon the sword, but as soon as I did that, he felt a severe headache. Summoning the sword consumed too much mana, or maybe it was because he tried to summon it, even though the sword was broken. This moment of confusion was the opportunity 𝒶𝓃 needed. The monster immediately pounced on Len, sinking its teeth into his body. Even so, Len took advantage of the opportunity. He hit the monster's wound as it rushed towards him, causing it to knock him out, hitting a nearby tree. Agitated, Len uses natural magic to create a weak shield between himself and the monster. Wool creates a cave from tree trunks and vines, where the monster gnaws endlessly. Inside the cave, Len examined his wound and realized that he could faint at any moment because the wound was so severe. At that moment, he remembered that he still had Rondo grass in him, but the image of his father appeared in his mind, causing him to decide not to use it, worried that it wouldn't be enough to save his father. As Chief Wolven approached, Len wondered if there were any other weapons that could be used against it. It was then that he saw his bracelet. Meanwhile, the monster got tired of trying to bite into the cave. It decided to use a wind attack. The strong wind force forced Len to leave the cave, but he quickly regained his balance and ran towards 𝒮𝓉𝒾𝓃𝒾𝓃 Rock. Consider it a signpost. Chief Wolven prepares to chase you, but Len used his natural magic to hold back the monster a bit. With mana nearly depleted, Len quickly ran to the bodies of the 3 wild boars he had hunted earlier. Remembering that with just 3 more he would unlock the metal magic sword, Chief Wolven broke through the vines, and Chief Wolven chased Len. In a last-ditch effort to stop the monster, Len threw his broken sword at it. The monster easily dodged. But as soon as it did so, vines suddenly rose from the sword, wrapped Chief Wolven tightly again. Len hastily absorbed the monster stones from the wild boars, determined not to lose. With one last effort, Len summoned the metal magic sword. Just in time, when Chief Wolven was about to bite your head, Len stabbed the sword into the monster's head. Launch an attack through Chief Wolven's skull. The monster collapsed to the ground, covered in blood, and died instantly. Len finally admires the new sword he summoned, the metal magic sword. However, as soon as he won, Len felt exhausted. He slid down right next to the monster's body as his bracelet began to absorb the monster stone. Even though he won, Len knew he was in a dangerous situation when his body could no longer move. He hugged the bag tightly to his chest, thinking about his mother and father. Len could barely hear the sound of the horse's hooves and screams from afar when a group of people appeared from the horizon. Before losing consciousness, he realized that reinforcements had arrived just in time. They took Len home. They knocked on Ashton's door and introduced themselves as knights from 𝒶𝓃𝒃. One of them held Len in his arms, while the other gave it to his mother, bag containing Rondo grass. Meanwhile, at 𝒶𝓃𝒃, one of the knights reported to Vios that Len Ashton had defeated Chief Wolven himself. This was overheard by a young girl. She was extremely excited when she learned that a boy in their territory defeated a D-rank monster single-handedly. 2 months later, Len fully recovered and was spending his time leisurely on top of 𝒮𝓉𝒾𝓃𝒾𝓃 Rock in the forest. He was admiring Bandit's magical sword, which looked more like a finger armor than a sword. Honestly, Len didn't expect to receive a new magic sword after defeating Chief Wolven. He put it away and went down. Just then, a knight was waiting at the foot of the mountain. He worriedly reminded Len that he should inform them every time he wanted to go into the forest so they could escort him. On the way home, Len thanked them for arriving on time. The knight was happy to hear him say that, making the rush worth it. However, they were still surprised that Len was able to defeat the monster alone. At this time, the curious knight asked if Len's bag contained the treasure that Chief Wolven hid, and Len confirmed. Len told him that he wanted to sell the treasure to raise money to help the village. The knight said that the reward for the loot was tax-free, plus the materials from the monster were precious. So the Lord is buying them at a slightly higher price, enough for the village to grow over the next few decades. When he got home, Len's father praised him for doing so well. But Len quickly said that it was thanks to his father that he was able to defeat Chief Wolven. His father asked what he wanted as a reward, and Len immediately pointed to the beautiful pearl he was holding. In fact, he knew it was 𝒮𝓉𝒾𝓃 pearl, an extremely rare treasure. In addition to the pearl, Len also pretended that the bracelet was also in the treasure and asked to keep it so he could wear it publicly from now on. After receiving the reward, his father praised him again, because you protected him and the whole village. Peaceful life in the village returns, until one day Len came home, and he saw a strange girl. The girl is standing next to the brick wall. When she saw Len, the girl immediately asked, "Are you Len Ashton?" Len nodded in confirmation, even though he had never met her before. But for some reason, he felt familiar. Len had no idea that this moment was destined to happen, an encounter he always tried to avoid. The girl jumped down from the wall, seemingly satisfied that she had found the right person. Then she pulled out 2 small swords. The girl threw the remaining sword at Len, and she asked if his wound was okay. Len confusedly put the sword on the ground and replied that his wound had completely healed. He asked how she knew about him, but instead of answering, she just said, "We should start." Surprise! She rushed forward with her sword in hand. Len promptly blocked the attack, but the girl didn't stop. Her blows continuously came from many different directions. However, she seemed happy to see that Len was able to cope despite the slower start. Len was relieved and asked why they had to do this, silently praising her skills. However, she only replied gently, "The sword has been blunted, don't worry." The two continue to duel. The girl is always on the attack while Len has to defend carefully. To avoid both of them being accidentally injured, Len decided to end the match. He suddenly changed tactics, caught the girl losing her footing, and pulled them both to the ground, with him on top. "Okay, you win," Len said, panting. But the girl suddenly panicked. The girl told him to stay away. Len quickly backed away. When the girl stood up and said they should continue fighting, because she never admitted defeat. But before the two could get started, the guards appeared and called out, "Princess!" She was startled when she saw Vios approaching. Finally, she put the sword aside and curtsied, and she produced a letter addressed to Ashton's family. She said she came here on behalf of her father. According to her, her father greatly respected the Ashton family for taking down Chief Wolven. She introduced herself as 𝒮𝓃𝒾𝓃𝒹, the White Light Saint. Wait, did you just say 𝒮𝓃𝒾𝓃𝒹? The guards next to her noisily blamed her for leaving without an escort. The princess replied, annoyed that it had taken them too long to get back. Len still couldn't believe it. In front of him right now was the girl he was supposed to destroy in the game. Why did she appear here? The group returned to the Ashton mansion together, where the princess finally met Len's father. After that, only Licia and Len remained. Len was confused as he thought about this strange turn of events. In the game, 𝒮𝓃𝒾𝓃𝒹, the White Light Saint, never joins the protagonist's team. However, her strength is still very formidable, even surpassing that of the main character if she does not take the trouble to level up. In terms of personality and qualities, she is also one of the famous characters in the game. However, Licia could not become a romantic interest and was called an unconquerable heroine. Back in the present, Licia asked Len if he plans to visit the capital. She admitted that she came here purely out of curiosity, wanting to see firsthand the skills of the boy who defeated Chief Wolven. Through the match just now, she affirmed that Len is not only strong, but also very brave. She also expressed admiration for Len's ability to quickly adapt to swordsmanship, even though she suddenly asked him to fight. In the end, Len could only sigh at this strange situation. He had heard from the guard captain that the village was located on the border of Clausel, and it would take more than 10 days of horseback riding to reach the capital. Len thought, as long as he hides in this village, he will never meet the feudal lord's daughter. But she didn't expect Licia to come all the way here and meet him just to fight. He frankly said she overestimated his skills. He points out that his father had defeated the monster before, so his victory over Chief Wolven was not entirely his own. Furthermore, Len also said he didn't know any techniques, so he didn't believe he was as brave as she thought. She smirked, not believing anything he said. The fact that he remains so humble only proves that Len is different from other nobles, people who only brag as if they once had a chance to slay a monster. That's why she wanted him to come back to the city with her, so she could fight at any time. Len realized that she really liked swordsmanship through the recent match. He also knew that Licia was a hard worker, but he still wanted to stay as far away as possible, so he frankly told her that he had no intention of leaving the village. Upon hearing that, Licia thought Len didn't like her, because he tried his best to stay away from her all this time. Len replied that that was no reason, because if he left the village, then his father would be the only one who could deal with the monsters and all the rest. If a monster like Chief Wolven appeared, the entire village would definitely be destroyed. Furthermore, he liked life in the village and had never thought of living in the city. Licia also nodded and did not say anything more, but in her heart she refused to give up and would wait for another opportunity. That night, Licia had dinner with Ashton's family. After the meal, Len went to the stables to check on the horses. When a sword fell at his feet, he immediately knew who it was, and immediately turned back to ask Licia if this sparring session was their after-meal exercise. Licia was glad that he got the message, which made it easier for her. Furthermore, she had his parents' consent, so everything was fine. He was about to pick up the sword, but then decided not to. As if she could read his mind, Licia threatened to extend his stay if he did not pick up his sword. This made Len pretend to be happy as he picked up the sword, but when she saw him do so, Licia wondered even more why he so fiercely refused her. There must be a good reason, right? Whatever the reason, Licia decided to defeat him to find out. Len responded, What if I win? But she only said that she would visit him again. Either way, it was a win-win situation for her. She rushed towards him. She swung her sword and slashed. Wool is easily avoided, and Licia continued to attack with multiple consecutive slashes. However, she was surprised to see him easily block the attacks, even when he was lowering his defense. Len ignored her question, and he asked why Licia was so focused on defeating him. Licia points out that she hates losing. She is proud to be the Saintess of White, and she doesn't like losing to boys her age. Len, confused, asked her what being a Saintess had to do with it. While continuing to fight, She explained that it was because she was a saintess that her skills were blessed with superior physical abilities and proficiency in swordsmanship. Furthermore, she can also use secret magic. So with all these advantages, if you are defeated, she will feel very frustrated. 𝒉 begins to get more serious and attacks Len. Compared to before, even Len realized she was much faster and stronger. Surely that was the effect of holy magic. If you remember correctly from the game, holy magic is linked to the power of white magic, which has the ability to heal. Holy magic has the power to resist the curse of the undead and detoxify. Len finally counterattacked, but 𝒉 easily avoided it, repeatedly attacking him with a spinning attack. Len could only defend as she continued to attack. This time he asked why she didn't use all her attacks. She replied that the captain of the Night Guard would be angry if she used it without permission. Now Len is used to her movements. So when she threw her sword at him, he just gently stepped aside and pointed his sword at her neck. He admits she is very strong, but cannot compare to 𝒉. He quickly squeezed her arm, holding her back. 𝒉 was surprised. She tried to counterattack. She quickly regained her stance and continued to attack. Len used her motivation again to turn her around, knocked her down, and continued to point his sword at her neck. As 𝒉 lay on the ground, Len eventually won. This time, her eyes flashed because of what he had just done. But then she realized and backed away. She still refused to admit defeat. Until you hear the sound of applause, the signal is enough. The Night Guard captain applauded Len for his skill in defeating 𝒉 and her holy magic despite her youth. Now he understood why Len was able to defeat 𝒉 alone, in addition to being trained by his father, Roy. Len must have trained very hard to be so strong. The old man turned to the young girl. She must have realized Len's power by now, so that would be enough for her to return home, excited to continue her training. 𝒉 shyly admitted that and then approached Len. She apologizes for disturbing him and thanks him at the same time. Then she turned and left, leaving the two men behind. 𝒉 was the first to speak, apologizing for 𝒉 and promising to speak well of Len and his family to the Count. He further explained that none of his subordinates could compare to 𝒉 anymore, so she became more complacent. However, with this experience, he believes it will be a valuable lesson for the princess. If it were 𝒉, he would have preferred to extend his stay a few more days so they could continue fighting a bit more. However, despite his wishes, the older man told Len that they had to leave tomorrow morning. Anyway, it was 𝒉 who chose to go to the village and ask her father's permission to perform some tasks. This was Len's first time hearing about this, which made him a bit surprised. 𝒉 went on to explain that 𝒉 was acting on the Count's behalf, trying to calm the unrest caused by the recent incident. Len already knew 𝒉 was a person of outstanding character, but to actually represent her father at such a young age was truly impressive. In the end, he believes that she is a good girl on the inside, even though she is somewhat mischievous. But after all that, he still wondered how the story ended with him killing her in the game. Anyway, he couldn't know because the backstories of the characters in the game were not explored. The next morning came quickly, and 𝒉 could not sleep for a second. She couldn't let things end like that, so she decided to write a letter to Len. After finishing, she let 𝒉 read first. She said she wanted to give him the letter before leaving to express her gratitude to Ashton's family. She thought it would be better to convey the invitation through a letter. However, the older man couldn't help but say that, frankly. It was like a love letter. 𝒉 was stunned. When 𝒉 points out the parts in the letter, like the confession of a young girl passionately in love. He listed more details that hinted at that, and even 𝒉 had to admit. She felt embarrassed by this realization. She decided to put the letter away and planned to throw it away as soon as they left the village. Just like that, 𝒉 and the soldiers left Ashton's house. She rides a horse. A sudden strong wind blew her letter away, something she didn't realize at the time. Meanwhile, Len returned to 𝒮𝓼𝒾𝓃𝒹. Len tries to test Bandit's demon sword. He pointed his finger towards a bird flying nearby. Even though the distance was quite far, he was still able to grab a feather, proving the sword's capabilities. At that time, he discovered two birds on a nearby tree branch, fighting over a piece of paper. He decided to grab it too. That was the letter 𝒉 wrote. And when Len glanced over, he only frowned when he realized it was a love letter. Len continued reading the letter. He wondered who invited him to 𝒀𝓄𝐿. He noticed that the letter was made of high-quality parchment, and he thought that it might be written by 𝒉. But why here now? At that moment, he heard the sound of horse hooves, and he saw a group of knights approaching. Even though they weren't from 𝒀𝓄𝐿's group, Len quickly recognized their flag. The flag bears a different symbol than 𝒀𝓄𝐿. That means this group of knights is definitely from another realm. They stopped and surrounded Len. They asked if he was one of the people under the rule of the Ashton family. Len replied that he was Ashton's man, and asked who the other knight was. Finally, the old man took off his helmet and explained that he carried a letter from Viscount Givens to the Ashton family. Len remembers this name. He knew that their territory was northeast of where they were standing and had no relationship with the Ashton family. However, because they had a higher rank than the Earl, Len had to lead them to his house. Not long after, that same night, this person met Len's father. When I arrived and gave him the letter, that person immediately left, telling Len that he also had a letter for him from the Viscount, with an invitation for Len to join under him. It seemed that news of Len's victory over Chief Wolven had reached the Viscount's ears, leaving him very impressed with what Len had done. Before he could respond, one of the Count's remaining knights stepped into their midst and told the Viscount's messenger that the Count had sent an invitation to Len. The Viscount's knights countered that the Clausel family's simple invitation did not mean Len had accepted, so they saw no problem in approaching Len. The knight of the Clausel family stood right in front of them, indicating that this village was under the rule of the Clausel family. If the other knight wanted to talk to Len, he had to get past them first. As if to confirm this point, the knight of the Clausel family implied that the Viscount should at least know about social etiquette, regardless of differences in faction or rank. There was a tense moment as everyone held their breath in silence. In the end, the Viscount's knights gave in, saying they would make things right. After that, they left, while the knight of the Clausel family just watched them go away with tired eyes. Back inside the house, Len's father reads the letter, listing the Viscount's reasons for bringing their village into his domain. Simply put, there aren't any factional disputes, even with this small and nameless village, which Knight Clausel confirmed. The 𝒮𝒹 Empire is divided into 3 factions, led by nobles. The first faction is the Empire faction, which deeply worships the Lion King, the nation's founder. They believe that only the royal family can lead the country. Next is the Hero faction, consisting of those who have produced the heroes who defeated the Demon King. They are led by 7 major noble families and are hailed as the main faction in the game, the Legend of the 7 Heroes. Viscount Givens also belongs to this faction. However, many believe that the Empire's power needs to be limited in order for the 𝒮𝒹 Empire to become more free and democratic. In addition, they also believe that it is necessary to reduce the gap between rich and poor. Finally, the third faction is the Neutrals, made up of peaceful people who do not like conflict, including Count Clausel. Back in the present, Len asks Knight Clausel if annexing an area to another noble's territory is easy to do. The knight replied that it could be done as long as both parties agreed, although this was a very rare case. The question is, why would they want to take over a small, nameless village like theirs? The knight has a hunch that the Viscount might be plotting something behind the scenes. There must have been some motive behind this merger, after all. Many hope to attract the Clausel family into their arms. The Count is an excellent noble, and the presence of the Saintess of White is also of great importance. Len silently thought about how he didn't want to get involved in this trouble. However, because his family is linked to the Clausel family, he cannot avoid it. If anything, maybe they were caught up in an unimaginable problem. The Viscount's goals are currently unclear, but there's nothing wrong with being cautious. While reading the letter, Len noticed something strange and called his father's attention. According to the letter, they wanted to annex the village and garrison the knights to compensate for the lack of military force. Are they really referring to Chief Wolven as a military shortfall? Len's father also thought so, but that incident was an isolated case, and more than that, it seemed like an anomaly. Aside from the Chief Wolven incident, there are no records of the Ashton family lacking military power. Len thought for a moment, and he remembered the conversation with Vios. The old man had told him that if there was damage caused by monsters in the territory, the Lord could be punished for repeatedly dispatching forces that were not strong enough. The young knight also supported this view, saying that it was the Lord's responsibility to protect the territory. Following this logic, Len argued that if the land and neighboring villages suffered serious damage, there was a possibility that Clausel's family would be punished. He thought that might be Viscount Givens' target. Everyone was stunned at the idea of the Viscount taking advantage of this situation to blame the Clausel family. Len thought that the Viscount might try to pretend to help the accused Earl, and then entice them to join the hero's side. It seemed like the Viscount had been plotting this all along. Worst-case scenario is the Chief Wolven incident may have been orchestrated from the beginning by Viscount Givens. Len's father said that this suspicion may be too far-fetched, but nonetheless it is a serious accusation. Len explains to his father that he may be thinking too far ahead, as he currently has no evidence to prove his suspicions. However, if that were the case, everything would make sense. Len's father understood, and even Knight Clausel was surprised by Len's conclusion. Honestly, he said that the Count was also worried about this possibility, and he praised Len's reasoning skills. After that, the knights decided to report everything to the Earl. Everyone in the room advised each other to be more vigilant. Len couldn't help but worry about the possibility of facing the hero faction he had fought alongside in the story, but there was nothing they could do right now. So time passed, and winter has come. One fine day, Len and the Colossal Knights went hunting, grateful for their help in providing food for the winter. Despite this, the knights still hope Len will consider moving to the capital to achieve more success. However, Len replied as always that he had no intention of leaving the village, because he was the heir to the Ashton family, coming home with an excited mood. Len was surprised to see Lisha sitting comfortably and reading a book. She informed him that his mother had gone out with Mrs. Rigg, but what she received in return was just a, "Huh?" from Len. Len asked her what she was doing here, and she frankly replied that if he refused to go to the city, then she will come see you. Lisha returned with a few gifts. The first is a shower and a crystal that can produce water. With this tool, Len no longer needs to go to the river to get water. All the magical items she brings are powered by magic stones. However, Len is worried that these items are very valuable. Lisha reassures him that these are old items that she repaired with her savings. Furthermore, these gifts were just a small apology for the incident with Viscount Givens. Baron also wanted to protest, but even that was difficult, especially when they were facing higher-ranking nobles. Even though Lisha is the Saintess of White, she can only do so much. People with the title Saintess are blessed by the god Elfin, and are said to have reincarnated many times throughout history. However, they never defeated the Monster Lord or achieved great achievements like the Seven Heroes. Lisha changes the subject, asking Len to take her to his father's room. Lisha used her divine magic to heal Len's father, and he appreciated the princess's efforts. As they left the old man's room, Len asked if she had treated herself before coming here, and she replied that she had. Len didn't know that, which surprised him quite a bit. The two continued their usual practice, and Len noticed that her movements were sharper than last time. Suddenly, Lisha lost her balance. But Len quickly caught her before she fell to the ground, made her heart skip a beat. She immediately withdrew, and she began to compliment him on his endurance. Len didn't have time to answer because she continued talking about how much she enjoyed her training sessions with him. She suggested that they continue fighting the next morning. Lisha stayed at Ashton's house for a few more days. Take advantage of the time to practice as much as possible. Before she left, Len couldn't believe that Lisha actually kept her promise to come see him. However, Len knew that getting too close to her was not a good idea, because of what happened in the game. Time passes quickly, and the next important event affecting Len's life occurred in the spring of his 11th year. At this time, his father completely recovered and continued to hunt with him. They were on their way back when they discovered that Viscount Givens' knights were standing in front of their house. Same man from before. He welcomed Len enthusiastically. Once again, he invited Len to join. The Viscount told them that this time it was not just an invitation, but also a special offer for Len. He offered to sponsor Len so he could join a special class at the prestigious Royal Cadet Academy. Everyone was extremely surprised by this proposal, especially since enrolling in the academy was difficult enough, and the fact that Len was able to become a member of the special class was even more impressive. The knight proudly said, "Everyone knows that the special class at the academy is an excellent place, for it accepts only heirs from the 7 great heroic families and those of noble birth." There were also some outstanding talents nurtured right in the imperial capital. They were also selected for this class. Since the Viscount is the Deputy Minister of Justice, it would be easy for him to send a letter of recommendation to the academy. The knight turned to Len, asking if he wanted to develop his talents in the capital. But Len flatly refused. The knight couldn't believe his ears. Did he really refuse this invitation? Len reiterated that he wanted to stay in the village. This angered the knight, and he loudly asked why Len didn't want to become a noble. Len can receive the title as soon as he graduates. Len was determined with his decision because he knew the Royal Cadet Academy was an important setting in Legend of the 7 Heroes. The main character in the game is also a member of a special class. If Len joins the academy, it will lead him back to the game's timeline and will ultimately kill Lisha. Len told the knight that he felt satisfied with his daily life in his village. Instead of continuing to argue with Len, the knight decided to discuss the matter with Len's father. This time, he asked the father if he wanted to turn Len into a noble. The father also thought that if his son could enroll in the imperial capital and learn about the world, it would be a good thing. However, he affirmed that the final decision still belongs to Len. In addition, the father said that he had pride in serving under the Colossal family for many generations. So he would write a letter replying to the Viscount's invitation so that the knight could bring it back. The knight was so surprised. He said that they would personally deliver the answer to the Viscount, and the knight expressed disappointment with Len's father and son's choice. They left soon after, and a few days later, the knights from the 𝒶𝓃𝒃𝓃 family rushed to Len's house. They took with them 𝒟𝒃𝓃, who was sick. Vios explains that the young lady fell ill 3 days ago while they were in the middle of a visit to another village. According to him, she was suffering from a strange disease that only affected children with high magical powers. Fortunately, the disease is not contagious to others, and once a child is infected, they develop immunity to the disease. The worrying thing is that this disease has no warning signs and can strike at any time. If the lady's immune system is weakened, the disease can lead to dangerous complications and even death. That's why she needs to rest for at least 2 to 3 weeks. Len turned pale when he heard those words and immediately offered to take care of 𝒟𝒃𝓃 until she recovers. 3 days later, 𝒟𝒃𝓃's condition finally stabilized. When she woke up, Len visited her in her room. He looked intently at her red cheeks, and immediately 𝒟𝒃𝓃 apologized. She started talking about how she came to this village on her own and then got sick not long after. Even worse, she also made Len have to take care of her. Although 𝒟𝒃𝓃 did not dare raise her head, she went on to say that this trip was originally to prove their determination to Viscount Gibbons. They planned to visit more villages than usual, because she wanted to use her influence as saintess to prove that 𝒶𝓃𝒃𝓃 was united under her presence. At this point, 𝒟𝒃𝓃 sobbed, feeling hopeless because she couldn't do anything. She couldn't defeat Len, which only made her feel like she was tarnishing her mother's honor. When he heard her mention his mother, Len immediately asked about her. 𝒟𝒃𝓃 choked up and said that her mother was very happy when she learned that her daughter was the saintess of white. She believed that 𝒟𝒃𝓃 would do great things, even if she died of illness. 𝒟𝒃𝓃 never met her mother, but every time she wears her white outfit, she likes to imagine that her mother is cheering for her because that's the outfit her mother wore when she was young. 𝒟𝒃𝓃 always wants to meet everyone's expectations, but everything is not as expected. That's why she told Len that this would be the last time she visited him. Len didn't know what to say. Meanwhile, 𝒟𝒃𝓃 continued to say that she had heard about him turning down an invitation to the Imperial Military Academy from Viscount Gibbons. Watching him and her father go to extremes to show their loyalty woke her up, making her realize that she needed to stop acting like a spoiled child. She discussed this with Vios, apologizing for causing trouble to his family, and she thanked them for the kindness they had shown her. Len just bowed his head, thinking about Lycia's purity. If anyone keeps a secret, it's you. But is this really the end? When silence filled the air, 𝒟𝒃𝓃 broke the silence by asking to borrow some ink to write a letter to her father. Len was happy to help. He told her to check the stationery box on her desk. She was a bit surprised, and then Len explained that she was actually in his room because he was busy cleaning the living room when they got home. 𝒟𝒃𝓃 felt guilty again and continued to bother him. She felt guilty for making him feel uncomfortable because of her unexpected statement. Len asked 𝒟𝒃𝓃 if she could bring a magical fire-making tool next time, even if just as a spare. 𝒟𝒃𝓃 didn't understand what he was trying to say. You just said this would be your last visit. But Len explains that he just wants a fire-making tool at home the next time she visits. 𝒟𝒃𝓃 clarified that this would be the last visit, as she did not want to cause him any more trouble. Furthermore, she remembered that every time she suggested sparring with him, he always tried to avoid it. Len explained that everyone would feel confused if someone suddenly offered to practice with them. However, if she promised to inform him in advance, he would agree. Len told 𝒟𝒃𝓃 that he would be willing to spar with her anytime she wanted. After that, he left, but not forgetting to tell her that they should talk more when she felt better. As soon as the door closes, Len felt a bit annoyed with himself. He wondered what he was doing on the other side of the door. 𝒟𝒃𝓃 wondered if Len was serious when he said she might come back to visit the village again. As the headache gradually subsides, she stood up, and she went to Len's desk to begin writing a letter to her father. While searching, she accidentally discovered a piece of paper neatly stored in a box. That was the letter she wrote earlier. 𝒟𝒃𝓃's hands trembled in panic. Why is your letter here? She thought she had lost it, but this is not the main problem. This means Len read her letter, making her just sigh and sit on the floor. She told herself that this letter was not a love letter, at least not in the way she thought. She doesn't love Len, she just really admires Len in general. But why do you keep something like that? She has a lot of questions, but she decided to put the letter back in the box. She lay down on the bed and wondered what Len thought when he read her letter. The next day, when Len read the letter again, Vios and the other soldiers helped with the carpentry and hunting work at the young lady's request. Len's father goes with Vios and the others into the forest, while he assigns repair duties to Len. Len's mother went to see Mrs. Rigg to get more medicine. Lycia stayed in the house while everyone was busy helping in the village, because she is recovering slowly. Everyone thought she would only need another week to fully recover, and they could continue their journey back to 𝒶𝓃𝒃𝓃. At least everyone thinks so. One day while everyone was away, it suddenly rained heavily, causing all activities to be suspended. Len and 2 other riders were sheltering from the rain. Then suddenly he smelled burning, like the smell of a field after a controlled burn. Feeling uneasy, Len quickly ran home, and he was stunned to see his house on fire. He rushed in faster. He saw several knights lying down, covered in blood. He examined a person's body and discovered that the knight's neck had been bitten. Did a monster do this? But more importantly, 𝒉𝒽a remained in the house. Without hesitation, Len rushed in, sword in hand. He saw the bodies of the remaining knights lying in the house. Then finally he went to his room upstairs. He saw a hooded figure next to a winged creature. This creature is a D-class monster called Mana Eater. 𝒉𝒽a remained unconscious on the bed, while the other figure just stood and watched as Len rushed forward. That person guessed who he was, but Len didn't have time to do anything. Len's vision began to spin, and he collapsed to the floor. He has no strength left. At that moment, the figure revealed that he was holding a powerful incense. The scent is enough to make a dragon faint for several days. As Len's consciousness gradually faded, he tried to reach out toward 𝒉𝒽a again, before everything went dark. When Len woke up, he realized both his hands and feet were tied tightly. He tried to stand up, and he saw 𝒉𝒽a lying beside him, also tied up and unconscious. He approached her, asking if she was okay. He noticed she was still breathing. Len breathed a sigh of relief. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the other side, surprised to see that Len was awake. But then the voice said, 4 days have passed since that event. The figure warned Len that if he tried to hide, he would be harmed, asking him to endure a few more days and not try anything stupid. But 4 days have passed. How far are they from the village? Len wondered why this person kidnapped them, and based on what happened before, he was certain that he was a beast tamer, able to summon and control monsters. Since he could control the D-class monster, Len believed that this was someone he could not risk without a plan. But what's more important is that 𝒉𝒽a's condition is deteriorating. If this continues, she will be in danger. Len is determined not to let her die, and he vows to save her. That night, Len had a dream. He dreams about Len Ashton in the original story. In the dream, he did not dare to go get the necessary rondo grass to treat his father, which caused his father's death. After his father's death, their village was attacked by something, causing many people to be killed. Len's mother even almost died, until 𝒉𝒽a and her knights came to save the village. Len's dream ended, as 𝒉𝒽a began to heal his mother, reminding her that she was truly a saintess. After seeing all that, Len wondered if his dream was how the character Len in the Legend of the Seven Heroes was described. Was their meeting destined to be like that? Len couldn't understand why he was dreaming about the original Len's past at this time, but at least he was glad to find that relations between him and 𝒉𝒽a were not strained. He woke up and noticed that 𝒉𝒽a's condition had worsened. Len still thinks about his dream, wondering why he had to kill her, and is there any special reason behind this? Suddenly, the carriage stopped, when the kidnapper opened the door and threw a pitcher of water and a piece of bread down to their feet. Len tried to convince that guy to release him, but he refused. After all, he had been giving them medicine and herbs for the past few days, so he didn't want to pamper them anymore. Before closing the door, the kidnapper told Len that screaming was useless because he was using a magic tool that only allowed him to hear what happened inside the carriage while he rested by the fire. Len quickly opened the water bottle. Use your mouth and knees to give 𝒉𝒽a some water. Looking at her in this state, he knew she was at her limit, and that was why he had to act this very night. The full moon has risen high in the sky. The fire has gone out when Len decided to take action. He checked through the gap in the carriage first, then summoned the metal demon's sword. Immediately, he was freed from his chains. Remove the chains from your feet and prepare to open the car door. Before taking action, he checked his surroundings, and he saw that the kidnapper had fainted. Len moved stealthily, sword in hand, supporting 𝒉𝒽a with the other. Suddenly, Mana Eaters appeared, crying out from the sky, forcing Len to dodge as a monster nearly crushed him and 𝒉𝒽a. He cut the carriage in half, creating a commotion that blocked the remaining Mana Eaters' path, but also awakened the kidnapper. This chaos creates a smokescreen for Len. He threw the metal demon's sword towards the cloaked figure. He was able to avoid it, but the sword still managed to cut off the pendant he was wearing. When he asked Len where he got the weapon from, Len's sword cut the horse's reins just in time. And Len summoned the wooden demon sword again. Len pointed his sword at the charging Mana Eater, at the same time summoning his natural magic to limit its movement, then do the same with the kidnapper. He also stole his pendant before they jumped on horseback. When he saw them about to escape, the cloaked man raised his stick to stop them, but Len quickly snatched the item from his hand with the robber's demon sword. Len was trying to calm his horse down when a Mana Eater rushed down, almost biting him in the face. If he hadn't cut it at the last moment, he probably would have been injured, When the Mana Eater fell, Len decided to take advantage of this opportunity to run away. The horse galloped away with all its might. The cloaked person has broken Len's natural magic, and he summoned monsters in the forest. This time, 3 different monsters chased them. Len now understands the power of his enemy. He can only control monsters weaker than himself. Len summoned the Metal Demon Sword, defeating many monsters at once. Even though countless others continued to chase him, suddenly Mana Eater appeared. It breathed fire right behind them, but Len did not falter. He only focused on escaping, not caring about the pursuit. Meanwhile, in 𝒮𝓃𝒾𝓃𝒹, Vios announced the news to Baron 𝒮𝓃𝒾𝓃𝒃, Laisha's father, that his daughter had been kidnapped. Vios apologized profusely and promised to accept any punishment, but begged the Baron to allow him to find and save the girl first. The Baron did not blame this loyal man. He understood that it was Laisha's orders that had caused the captain of the Night Watch to leave her. With that, Laisha's father ordered Vios to contact the imperial capital, the nobles of their faction, and the emperor about the emergency. However, everything was interrupted when a servant rushed into the room, informing Baron 𝒮𝓗 that he had guests from the imperial capital. 𝒮𝓗 faced the 3 men, who claimed to come on behalf of the Attorney General. They brought with them an official letter, stating that Baron 𝒮𝓃𝒃𝓃 is under investigation for careless management, which resulted in the monster causing serious harm to Viscount Given's neighboring territory. Meanwhile, Len and Laisha have successfully chased away the kidnapper and the beast, and are now lost in the misty wilderness. Len placed Laisha against a tree, and he gave her the medicine, promising that it would be effective even though it tasted very bitter. After Laisha finished drinking, Len continued to take care of her as the two wandered without any particular direction. After a while, Laisha's fever subsided, and she asked Len how he got those medicines. Len told Laisha that he had traded the medicine for some monster materials he had collected in a nearby village 3 days ago, along with some traveling supplies. Laisha thanks you, and she realized they were at the edge of Viscount Given's territory, making Len curiously ask how she knew that. Laisha pointed toward the Baldur Mountains. She explained that she could lead the way from there because she could estimate their location. Looking up at the mountains, Len suddenly remembered that this was where the final battle with the main boss took place in the first part of the game. He asked Laisha how long it would take to reach 𝒮𝓃, and she replied that it was about 4 days. But more importantly, she wanted to ensure his family's safety first. Len reassured that his parents were fine because they were not home when the incident happened. If anything, he was sure they were safely sheltering somewhere right now. Len thought it would be a good time to visit 𝒮𝓃, not only to see the Baron, but also to do a little sightseeing. Night quickly fell, and the two sought shelter in a nearby cave. As soon as the fire is lit, Len began preparing dinner, a bird. He managed to trap it on a nearby tree with vines. Speaking of vines, Laisha asked if Len was talking about his mysterious sword. Len nods but says that the true nature of that power is a secret. Laisha pouted slightly but didn't ask further. Instead, she started rummaging through their bags. That's when she found the pendant that Len took from the kidnapper. Curious, Laisha asked if the object was a magical tool and was broken. According to what Len remembered, the kidnapper said that he used a magic tool to soundproof the carriage, so it was very likely that it was this item. Laisha. Staring at the pendant, Laisha says that they can use it as evidence if they get into a difficult situation. Not long after, their dinner was ready. A moment later, Len gave the meal to Laisha, and the princess gently took a bite. Laisha was surprised that the food was so delicious, making Len satisfied knowing that it suited her taste. The next day, the two continued their journey to 𝒮𝓃. They walked and picked fruit from trees along the road. They stopped to rest by a river, where Len took advantage of washing clothes and helped the princess wash up. As Len approached to help, the sudden distance between the two made Laisha blush. Len quickly noticed, placing his palm on her forehead to check her temperature. Laisha hastily stepped back. She was confused by this unexpected action, and she suddenly remembered that Len had read her letter. At this moment, Laisha asked why he still kept it. The question confused Len. "What are you talking about?" he asked directly, but the princess just avoided it because she was too embarrassed, leaving Len lost in thought about what she was implying. Len remembered the magic stones he had collected before, and how his mother had also mentioned that his father also collected them when he was young. Is Laisha talking about that magic stone collection? Perhaps the princess finds this hobby odd. After a minute of silence, Len told Laisha that it always bothered him, but did not mention the magic stone directly. The princess misunderstood again and was frightened by his answer. What? What do you mean she's always on your mind? Len simply replied that that was the only way he could describe it, making Laisha even more embarrassed. She stammered and said that he could do whatever he wanted. making Len think that maybe the princess doesn't like the magic stones, because they are taken from monsters. He quickly apologized about his strange hobby, but 𝒉𝒃 got it wrong again. To avoid prolonging this awkward conversation, she quickly changed the subject. She told him to just call her by her name, making Len even more confused. The two passed by another village where Len traded ingredients from monsters for food. An old woman asked where they were going, and Len explained that they were just travelers with no specific destination. The old woman said that if they kept going straight, they would reach 𝒾𝓄𝒃. This made Len ask what was so special about that place. According to the old woman, a recent adventurer, the adventurer said that the baron there was about to be punished. This time, 𝒉𝒃 was the one to ask the old woman again, "Why does such a thing happen?" The old woman replied that she did not know, but there are rumors that the baron incited the monster to attack Viscount Givens. Don't want to hesitate another minute. The two immediately set out for 𝒾𝓄𝒃. 𝒉𝒃 knew for sure that her father never did that, so it was clear that this was just a fabricated story. Meanwhile, at �𝓄𝒃, a luxurious carriage appeared in the city, attract people's attention. The persistent knight from before welcomed the arrival of Viscount Givens at 𝒾𝓄𝒃. He was happy to report that once they took control of this land, the hero faction's influence would expand significantly. The Viscount just coldly replied that in order for 𝒉𝒃 to escape decline, the first thing they had to do was defeat the 𝒾𝓄𝒃 family. Baron 𝒾𝓄𝒃 and Viscount Givens finally faced each other. The representative of the Attorney General stated that the royal court will carefully consider this matter in accordance with the Great Royal Law, based on the arguments presented before them. He added that the official announcement will be made tomorrow morning, at the same time as today's hearing. All those present began to stir at this decision. The last baron spoke up, said he already knew what the outcome would be. In the next few days, he will be taken to the imperial city and receive punishment. Although 𝒉𝒀s tried to get them to file an appeal to bring the case to the royal court, even a good faith trial, but the baron interrupted. Just looking at Viscount Givens's facial expression was enough, Baron said. He seems to know that victory is his. If he did anything, the baron would face intervention, and that was the best-case scenario before the trial even began. However, he still found it strange that a high-ranking noble would resort to such extreme methods. This makes the baron wonder if this is just a factional dispute. Back to Len and 𝒉𝒃, the two decide to camp in the woods that night. The princess has settled down in her camping bed. Len stayed up all night thinking about how he could save everyone. As it stands, the baron will be falsely accused and lose power. And what's worse, according to 𝒉𝒃, not much can be expected from neutral high-ranking nobles. What can a child like him do? 𝒉𝒃 actually wasn't asleep yet. She quietly observed him. Len told her that he was thinking about what he could do to help the baron. She told him to call her 𝒉𝒃, and in return, she would also call him Len. She sat up and suggested they leave early in the morning. They need to return to �𝓄𝒃 immediately to testify about the kidnapping. However, the problem is whether people believe their words or not. They need evidence linking the kidnapping to Viscount Givens. The two wondered how they could help the baron. As discussed, they set out just as dawn was breaking. They passed through the ruins in the forest, vacant lots, and soon, 𝒉𝒃 realized they were in familiar territory, even though they had strayed from the main road. 𝒉𝒃 tells Len that as they travel through the forest and hills ahead, they will soon reach �𝓄𝒃. Hearing this, Len asked if they were safe, and 𝒉𝒃 confirmed, as there would be guards from �𝓄𝒃 patrolling around. However, when the two walked a few more steps, a familiar but not very welcoming face appeared before them. That's Viscount Givens's knight. His knights breathed a sigh of relief when they found them. Both Len and 𝒉𝒃 stood still, completely surprised by the sudden appearance of these knights. Viscount Givens' knight explained that they had been searching for them for the past few days at the baron's request. From within the bushes, more knights of Viscount Givens appeared. They surrounded Len and 𝒉𝒃. Don't let them have a way out. Viscount Givens' knight continued to say that they needed to leave immediately and offered to take them back to safety. Both were silent, while 𝒉𝒃 bowed her head and asked if she could handle this. She warns that this action could be dangerous for both of them, but Len comforts her, affirming that he will be prepared for any further situation. Realizing that they were planning something, one of the riders asked what they were discussing. 𝒉𝒃 immediately called the knight's attention and said that the decision to go with him would depend on his explanation. She pulled out the pendant that Len had taken from the kidnapper and showed it to the knight. 𝒉𝒃 asked him if he recognized this pendant, but he replied no, even asking what it was. However, 𝒉𝒃 quickly noticed a slight change in his face when his eyebrows slightly twitched. She explains it's a magical device they got from the kidnapper. Viscount Givens and his knights disagreed, and he offered to accept the pendant as proof. But 𝒉𝒃 refused, saying she would ask the merchants to check. This statement made the knight hesitate. And 𝒟e𝒶 went on to explain that the merchant guild would know the person selling it, or at least have information about the previous owner. The knight tried to convince her, saying that it was impossible because there were too many magical devices in the 𝒟𝒻 Empire. 𝒟e𝒶 understood that this magic item was precious because it was not a common thing, and she was confident that the merchant guild leader in the capital could find out information about it. Once they know the origin, they will determine if the item was stolen or if it was given to the kidnapper by someone. If it is the latter case, the person who gave it to the kidnapper will definitely have to go to court and be responsible for his crime. Because someone intentionally slandered the 𝒾𝓃𝒃 family, the atmosphere of silence and tension prevailed as the knights exchanged glances. However, Viscount Gibbons and his knight commander continued to pretend, saying that it was even more important that he was the one carrying this item, and asked 𝒟e𝒶 to hand it over to him. 𝒟e𝒶 called him a fool because they had no obligation to give him anything. Furthermore, they were in 𝒾𝓃𝒃 territory, and even the village where the kidnapping took place was under their jurisdiction. The knight tried to protest. But before she could say anything, the princess interrupted, saying that she did not want to be protected by a knight who did not understand reason. She then told Len that they should continue on their way, even though the knight said they needed an escort. 𝒟e𝒶 was adamant, saying they didn't need anyone to escort them since they were almost to the city. She doesn't even trust anyone to protect her other than Len. She strode past the knight and said that. The knight gritted his teeth in anger at her actions. Then he pulled out his sword and was about to attack Len and 𝒟e𝒶. He asked them to come with him. However, before the knight could strike, Len summoned his sword. He used his sword to cut off his sword, then cut his hand, leaving him completely disarmed. Even though he was injured, the knight still grabbed Len's cloak. Meanwhile, 𝒟e𝒶 thanks Len because now the knights cannot touch them. Now, they can put Viscount Gibbons on trial for another crime, 𝒟e𝒶 using her sacred magic. 𝒟e𝒶 sent him flying backwards from his horse, and the magic began to burn his arm. The remaining knights decided to intervene, not allowing Len and 𝒟e𝒶 to escape. Len summoned his wooden demon sword. He used natural magic to imprison the other knights, giving both of them a chance to escape. Viscount Gibbons and his chief knight ordered the rest to give chase, because they needed to report the matter to the Viscount. They must capture Len and 𝒟e𝒶 alive at all costs. Other riders chased after them. They were determined to capture Len and 𝒟e𝒶 alive, and the chase lasted all night. 𝒟e𝒶 now became desperate, begging their horse to try just a little longer, and she promised that they would reach the human settlement if they could get over the hill ahead. But unexpectedly, the same cloaked person was waiting for them at the top of the cliff, with mana-eaters ready to wait for orders. Their kidnapper had anticipated that they would both pass through here. Before Len could react, the hammer-wielding monster raised its hand. The ground shook, and soon after, the ground collapsed, preventing their horse from continuing to move. Plant and insect-like monsters quickly appeared from cracks in the ground. 𝒟e𝒶 turned to look at Len, asking for a sword, and they saw that the monsters had devoured the two knights who were chasing them. The beast trainer appeared from above, saying that he knew 𝒟e𝒶 would not surrender easily, so he had to use force. If they continued to resist, he would have no choice but to kill them. Len uses natural magic to trap bee-like monsters, while 𝒟e𝒶 chops the mushrooms. The two cooperated to destroy all monsters, but Len noticed that she had gotten a lot stronger. Of course, that she trained hard to defeat Len. However, despite joining forces, the two still cannot deny that they are outnumbered, and they will soon be exhausted unless they defeat the beast's trainer. The ground shook again, and a giant worm monster emerged from the ground, ready to devour them. Len kept calm, summoning the metal monster sword. He used his sword to slash the giant worm monster quickly. This time, 𝒟e𝒶 also had to acknowledge Len's strength, but his attention turned to the kidnapper. He removed his hood, revealed himself, and commented on how Len used wind pressure to take down the monster. Len was stunned when he recognized the kidnapper. 𝒟𝒾𝓃𝒃, a beast trainer, one of the bosses appearing in the first part of the Legend of the Seven Heroes. Len recalls his character having difficulty facing his natural magic. But right now, my concern is not the past, but the current situation where he is an adventurer wandering around the continent. Len could not have met 𝒟𝒾𝓃 so early. He should have met him after joining the Imperial Officer Academy. Even though Len and 𝒟e𝒶 were surrounded by countless monsters, his mind was still spinning, wondering why 𝒟𝒾𝓃 was here. In the game, 𝒟𝒾𝓃 is a beast trainer known for his ruthlessness, killing even his own kind, which caused him to be exiled from his homeland. 𝒟𝒾𝓃's arm was forcefully sealed as punishment for his crime. However, the help of his previous staff had returned some of his true power. Without it, 𝒟𝒾's power is reduced to the point where he cannot use two skills at the same time. Len thought that destroying the staff before they escaped might have been the reason why 𝒟𝒾 did not use his natural magic to attack them. But if he had been hired by Viscount Gibbons, perhaps this man had provided some information that helped 𝒟𝒾𝓃 break his seal. Now that the hills were almost filled with monsters, 𝒮𝓾𝓚 continued to fight and slay his opponents. Lisha asks Len if he can defeat 𝒮𝓾𝓚, saying that she may have to change her strategy depending on his answer. This monster trainer has 2D level monsters on its side, and if the Mana Eaters attacked them both, Len thought it would be their defeat. However, the surprise is, Lisha is not that pessimistic. She reminded him that she was the saintess of the white light. Suddenly, Lisha began to gather energy, sparks like dust around them, as she bowed her head and touched the tip of her sword to her fingertips. Len felt strong energy surging through his body. Before 𝒮𝓾𝓚 realized what was happening, Len and Lisha destroyed the monsters in a blink of an eye. Thanks to Lisha's holy magic, they destroyed all the monsters, until a Mana Eater flew towards them. Mana Eater breathed fire as it approached. Lisha used holy magic to protect them, while Len cut off the monster's wings as it approached, causing the monster to scream in pain and burn, incinerating the remaining monsters in its path. With Lisha by his side, Len believes they can make it through. However, a giant worm monster appeared from below the ground. Although there are many immediate threats, Lisha also believes that they will win as long as they have Len by their side. Len is determined to destroy 𝒮𝓾𝓚. As their horses charged towards the enemy, amidst the burning corpses of monsters, Len raised his sword to deliver the decisive blow. But at that moment, Mana Eater appeared to block 𝒮𝓾𝓚's path, protecting its owner from a direct attack. The Mana Eater monster crashed into them, causing both of them to fall off their horses. Luckily, Len caught Lisha in time. Meanwhile, 𝒮𝓾𝓚 stood there, bleeding until the rock beneath his feet collapsed from Len's attack. Amidst the burning corpses of monsters everywhere, Len checked to see if Lisha was okay when he saw that she was too weak. Just as he thought, the sacred magic was too much for her, plus her illness. But he couldn't dwell on that thought any longer. Len realized that your enemy is still alive, even though he was injured, and he laughed savagely when he saw the blood in his hands. He didn't know if all the blood had been drained from his body, but once he still has the mark on him, his only goal is to kill as many people as possible. But now even that has become impossible. I wonder if this is my end, until his eyes landed on the panicked Lisha. He felt a familiar feeling, the excitement of seeing the expression of the dying person. That feeling filled him with excitement, especially when he was close to someone. Len became more wary of him, asking what the monster hunter was planning to do. Suddenly, the Mana Eater injured from before appeared from the rubble behind his enemy. At this moment, 𝒮𝓾𝓚 held out his hand, and he ordered the Mana Eater to bite off his arm. On 𝒮𝓾𝓚's face was a look of madness. When he asked the Mana Eater to eat both the left arm and the seal, the monster immediately followed suit, creating a gruesome scene of bloodbath right in front of Len and Lisha. After eating the left arm, the Mana Eater continued to eat its master's right arm, causing 𝒮𝓾𝓚 to cry out in both joy and pain. Before the monster could swallow his entire arm, the monster's body began to transform. Chains appeared from 𝒮𝓾𝓚's chest, imprisoning him, while a sapling branch began to grow next to it. It turns out that sacrificing both arms isn't enough to break the seal. But now, when the situation was like that, the monster hunter became desperate, more determined than ever to end everything. He had just regained his balance when a blade pierced his body again, causing the newly transformed Mana Eater to be sent flying. Meanwhile, 𝒮𝓾𝓚's sapling produces a potion, and crushed the potion. Let the liquid spread all over his body. Although it was an expensive medicine, it could not relieve the pain in 𝒮𝓾𝓚's animal room, because he still felt everything clearly. The Mana Eater began to wreak havoc, just in time for Len to move Lisha out of the way. He summoned his spirit sword, just as 𝒮𝓾𝓚 finally ordered the monster to kill both of them. Before Len could strike the first blow, the Mana Eater disappeared before his eyes. A Mana Eater appeared next to him and attacked him immediately. Len was able to dodge, but was still thrown away by the force of the blow, and the monster took that opportunity to hit him hard. In midair, Len's body was still floating when Mana Eater decided to crush him with its hind legs. Luckily, Len was faster and was able to avoid the attack at the last minute. When the monster uses its tail to attack, Len didn't have time to get help, thinking they were in big trouble, because this Mana Eater is completely different from the monster he once knew. Moreover, it was already B level, or maybe the monster is much stronger. The monster roared as tall as a tower, overwhelming everything around it. At that time, Lisha finally woke up and saw the fight between Len and Mana Eater. She witnessed Len being thrown away, bloody and bruised right in front of her. When the monster started to get closer, then 𝒮𝓾𝓚 was completely covered by trees, amused by the brutality taking place before his eyes. Lisha crawled towards Len and used sacred magic to heal him enough for him to regain consciousness. She held out her hand. Thank you, Len, for always protecting her, no matter how selfish she is. She gave him a small smile and told him to go, to escape. As the monster approached, Len smiled back and told her he would never leave her. At this moment, Mana Eater stood above them, preparing to crush them with his claws. Len turned around and blocked the attack with his sword. A tense moment occurred as Len stood firm, until he pushed the monster back. causing it to lose its balance. Len also fell at the same time. The sword disintegrated. When he fell on 𝐿aixia, his hand placed on her chest. His arms began to grow, and he saw in his notification that a new demon sword was available for use. Mana Eater stood up, preparing to attack them. When Len summoned his new sword, he is determined to protect 𝐿aixia at all costs. Len summons a sword of light. He pointed it at the Mana Eater, creating a beam of light that pierced half of the monster's body. The last ray of light covered its entire body, and also 𝑅𝒾𝓃, the monster hunter, also disappeared when his body was captured in that ray of light. A great flash of light burst forth over the mountains. Then the light exploded and released a beam that pierced the night sky, illuminates the surrounding forest. Len still doesn't understand the power he just used. Then he fell unconscious while the light still played around them. At 𝒀𝓗, the city awoke early that morning, when most residents woke up to see the Baron before he was transported to the imperial capital. Even the people were skeptical when the trial just ended a few days ago and the court had a verdict. They knew that Viscount Givens was an aristocrat who worked as an assistant to the Minister of Justice. So many people had guessed that he was pulling the strings behind the scenes. Indeed, the Baron's transition has begun. Among them were Viscount Givens and his knights. Once the transfer of the baronage is complete, the capital will take over control. One thing bothered him. Why was the Viscount so interested in Len Ashton? He could understand if his lord was interested in white saints, but Len Ashton was just a country knight. Upon hearing that, Viscount Givens smiled and revealed that he accidentally discovered important information about Len Ashton not long ago. The Viscount believed that if he could control the entire Ashton family, there would be a chance for the Givens family to rise among heroes. This noble decided to withhold other necessary information, telling the other that he would understand later. If anything happens, he was more worried about the beam of light seen at dusk. If it was Saintus's power, then it could only be something that happened to 𝑅𝒾𝓃. In response, the knight told his lord that he would dispatch the rest of the army to investigate, hoping that they would be able to capture them soon. Viscount Givens gave the final order to settle things, because he did not want the situation to become any more confusing. Outwitting the Emperor's faction was difficult enough, so failure was not an option. The two of them were so busy talking to each other, they didn't notice a figure standing and watching in the crowd. When they had passed through 𝒀𝓗's entrance, they saw someone approaching them. They could not be identified because their identities were hidden under the morning sunlight. Everyone stopped, eager to know who it was. When 𝑉ios realized it was the princess with Len, he hurriedly ran to her side, while the Baron called out to her but was stopped by the other knights. 𝐿aixia said they would explain everything later, because right now she doesn't want to waste Len's effort. She turned to Viscount Givens. She spoke so disrespectfully that it made him somewhat scornful for her lack of politeness. The Viscount warns her to be careful with her words, but 𝐿aixia replied that she had no respect for the offender. The Viscount was surprised. Then he smirked and said that it was her father who was the convicted criminal. 𝐿aixia did not answer his accusation, but from her expression it could be seen that the princess was trying to keep her composure. Looking at her, it seemed like she had gone through a lot of hardships, and she was barely able to stay conscious. 𝐿aixia took a deep breath before giving them the pendant they got from 𝑅𝒾𝓃. She tells the Viscount that this is a magic tool they got from the goblin he hired to kidnap them. She asserts that if they investigate the locket, they will find a connection between the Viscount and their kidnapper. Instead of feeling threatened or surprised, Viscount Givens looked at 𝐿aixia contemptuously and asked, "Is this really coming from the mouth of Princess Saintess?" But the princess did not back down, repeating her previous stance and claiming that they were attacked by the goblins the Viscount hired. Viscount Givens responded to her question, asking why they had appeared from there. Furthermore, if there was only this magic tool, it wouldn't be enough as proof. 𝐿aixia started to feel more frustrated. She insisted that they conduct an investigation first, and they were also attacked by the Viscount's knights in the nearby forest. Upon hearing this, the Viscount only frowned at the new accusation, and the princess pointed at his chief knight. She knew it was the person who drew his sword and attacked her, and when Viscount Givens turned to ask his knight if that was so, the latter lied and said he was busy patrolling the woods outside the square under the Viscount's orders. With those words, Viscount Givens declared that the princess had been deceived by someone. 𝐿aixia refused to give up, insisting that an investigation be conducted, but the Viscount said it was unnecessary. Finally, 𝑉ios spoke up, siding with the princess and suggesting that it would be a good idea to consider 𝐿aixia's words. Viscount Givens asserted that it was not necessary. If they really wanted, a new trial could be held in the imperial capital. After a moment of silence, Len finally spoke up and said that they should show their arms. The Viscount was surprised and asked Len who he was talking to. Just as Len said he was referring to the Viscount's knight, Len could barely maintain consciousness. His body leaned against Leisha's back. The princess turned to the Viscount's knight, asking him to turn over his hand. As it should have had a scar from when Len and Leisha had fought him before, Vios also approached the knight, asking him to do so, while this person turned to look at the Viscount for help. But Vios began to show impatience, even though the young rider insisted that he was elsewhere. Finally, Vios threatens to cut him down. At this time, the people in 𝒾𝓃𝒃 began to become uneasy, whispering to each other. When the Viscount's knight finally had to reveal his bandaged hand, Vios finally saw the scars on the young knight's hands, and he clearly understood that there were not only wounds caused by swords, but also burns from holy magic. Vios points out that any wound caused by holy magic will leave a temporary mark, no matter how expensive the tonic is. The young knight turned to look at Viscount Givens, but he just smirked. Don't believe this evidence. If they believe such things so easily, then perhaps they should form a new council to prove this knight's innocence. But no matter what, the Viscount asserted that it would be best to settle everything in the imperial capital this time. The older man raised his voice, emphasizing that the first trial was over and that the empire's laws were absolute. With that, the decision to transfer the barony remains the same. In the crowd, whispers began to sound. Vios and Leisha's faces both drooped when the Viscount announced that they would be transferred. At this moment, Leisha began to shed tears. She reached out her hand and panicked, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, a clap rang out, attracting everyone's attention. Everyone turned to see who was doing it, when an older man approached them. This man praised Leisha and Len's efforts and courage. He also said that he shared the same thoughts and feelings as them. Viscount Givens asked who that man was, and he just introduced himself as Edgar. Edgar smiled gently, telling Leisha that he would now take care of this. Edgar offers to help them complete the story, and then they both turned to the Viscount. Edgar added that he had come for Baron 𝒾𝓃𝒃 on his master's orders. Viscount Givens raised his voice, showing impatience as he asked Edgar who his master was. Hearing that, Edgar still kept a gentle smile and held out a tiger seal, bearing the symbol of his master's family. Viscount Givens, his knights, and the representative of the Attorney General all turned pale when they saw it, while Edgar savored the feeling that they recognized their master without having to reveal his name. Viscount Givens resolutely refused to lose, implying that Edgar was definitely plotting something. Edgar calmly explained that plotting against a noble family was a crime punishable by death, something the Viscount must have known well. Edgar turned to the officials of the Emperor's court, announcing that not only was he free to act as he pleased during this trial, but he also had the right to speak the name of his master. Before the other person could speak, Edgar continues that there are some inexplicable points in this story, and for that reason he proposes to reorganize Baron's trial. Edgar told the officials that his master was currently with Baron 𝒾𝓃𝒃. At the same time, he thanked Len Ashton, to whom he was very grateful. If a similar situation occurs again, Edgar's owner will monitor and resolve it to the end. Upon hearing the implicit threat in Edgar's statement, the officials and Viscount Givens only grew paler. The Viscount felt frustrated, wondering why this man suddenly interfered in something he shouldn't have interfered with. The feeling of pressure from Edgar's master made the Viscount feel even more stressed. Edgar declared that his master could now render aid without worry, thanks to the miracle that Len and Leisha had created. Anyway, it was Len Ashton who saved someone's life. Len opened his eyes and realized he was lying on the bed. Around him is a strange space. When Leisha woke up soon after, she hugged him, tears rolling down her eyes. The princess told him what happened, and Len was surprised to discover that he had been unconscious for the past month. 𝒮𝓽𝒃𝓃𝒃 was also in the room, insisting that Len stay longer in his castle until his wound healed. The Baron continued that, after the confrontation with Viscount Givens, a retrial was held that very day, and he was exonerated. Leisha's father was proven innocent, all thanks to the help of Len and the princess, for which he was extremely grateful. On the contrary, Viscount Givens was brought under suspicion and was tried in his own territory, but that trial never took place because the Viscount took his own life by poison. Len felt shocked when he heard that, but still doubted whether it was really suicide or whether he was forced to do it. The Baron also gave his speculation, saying that Viscount Givens may have been forced by his family. On the other hand, it is possible that this elderly man chose to give up rather than be arrested. What's even more strange is that someone set fire to his mansion and nothing remained. However, aside from this unfortunate incident, 𝒮𝓃𝒃𝓃 thanked Len once again for helping him get out of trouble. In the end, it was thanks to Len that a major noble decided to help. Len felt confused, not understanding what the Baron wanted to say. The older man explains that it all has to do with Chief Wolven and the incidents that occurred. The materials obtained from the monster's corpse are considered valuable medical raw materials, but are somewhat complicated. Chief Wolven's internal organs must be kept intact, otherwise they cannot be refined and used as medicine. Due to the difficulty of collection, the medicine extracted from Chief Wolven is rarely distributed in the world. But Len succeeded in killing the monster and left all the internal organs and other organs in good condition. Because of their near-perfect condition, the Baron made a deal with a Marquis who wanted the material, on the condition that he would cooperate with Lizard in case of emergency. The medicine from Chief Wolven saved the life of the Marquis' daughter, who had been bedridden for many years due to illness. After the story, the Baron gave Len the Marquis' card, saying that the Marquis invited Len to his mansion upon seeing the card. Len immediately recognized the family crest engraved on the card. 𝒮𝓃𝓃𝒾𝓃𝒹 finally told Len that the card belonged to Marquis Ignart, a great noble of whom the royal family was extremely proud. Now Len understood why the crest on the card was so familiar, that of the final villain in the Legend of the Seven Heroes. The Marquis was a man of both military and cultural talent who was behind the impressive development of maritime transport in the Empire. Despite being a respected noble, the Marquis cooperated with his enemies and plotted to resurrect the Monster King to destroy the 𝒮𝒹 Empire. During the game, Len remembers that the reason why the Marquis turned his back on the righteous side was the death of his daughter, and as far as he knew, there was no way to save her. This makes him wonder if he just saved her life. Related to that, is the plot changing? Len dismissed that thought now that his parents had also arrived after the village was attacked. Len's parents had long since evacuated and went straight to 𝒀𝓃 as soon as they heard he was safe there. Even though their house had burned down, they still brought with them some items that had not been destroyed by the fire. Len's father was happy to see that his son was okay. So much so that in that moment, Len suddenly remembered that his bracelet had absorbed magic from 𝒮𝓃 the moment he touched her, although there are no longer any engravings on the bracelet. But Len couldn't help but wonder why it reacted to 𝒮𝓃. Furthermore, what was the magic sword he summoned back then? After meeting his parents, Len walked around 𝒀𝓃 Castle with the princess. The two chatted casually when Len suddenly stared at 𝒮𝓃 and wondered why he did that. Although Len initially dismissed that thought, he still asked gently if the princess had a magic stone in her body. 𝒮𝓃 was surprised. How did Len know? Did her father tell him? Len quickly apologized, saying it was just a joke. But 𝒮𝓃 admitted that she actually had a magic stone in her body, and only the most powerful saints possessed them. She asked Len to keep this secret because only the saint's family and the elders in the temple would know. Len promised to keep it a secret, but inside he wondered, does the magic sword he created have anything to do with the legend of the Seven Heroes? This new story made him think more, but also yields more answers than questions. Len also couldn't help but think about why he always tried to stay away from 𝒮𝓃. Len is determined to avoid the bad future that people say is inevitable. But now he is in 𝒀𝓃. If there is one thing Len is sure of, it is that he has completely changed the path of the original Len Ashton, contrary to the dream he once had. His father was supposed to be dead, and 𝑅𝒾𝓃 was supposed to just be a mid-level boss in the first part of the game. He also changed the fate of the Ignart family's daughter. But if this continues, will the Marquis betray the Empire in the future? Len realizes that every decision he makes impacts the world in ways he cannot understand. Deep in thought, he was suddenly startled when he felt 𝒮𝓃's hand touch his cheek. The princess was worried because he suddenly became silent, and Len responded to her with a small smile. He told her he was just wondering who he was, until 𝒮𝓃 cupped his cheek and told him he was her hero, no matter what anyone said. Back at the principal's office of the Imperial Military Academy, the bright white light seen at the 𝒀𝓃 border became hot news. Even the Imperial press reported about it, and it's currently being read by Headmaster Cronoa Highland, who is looking forward to a little excitement in his life. In the first part of The Legend of the Seven Heroes, several notable events happened as the story progressed. There was a noble who died of unknown causes, and a royal guard lost his mind and turned his back on the third prince. Some called it an invasion, while others said it was the wrath of God. However, none of that is correct. All these terrible events were orchestrated by one man, the head of a noble family who is driven by revenge. Marquis Ignart. His daughter was seriously ill, and despite his vast wealth and power, he could not find the right ingredients to make a cure. The Wolven monster's internal organs were just what he needed. Of course, the royal family had them on hand in case of unexpected events, but The emperor refused to share this resource with the Marquis. The emperor is not wrong to prioritize his family in case of an emergency. However, his refusal of the Marquis led to the death of the Marquis's daughter. Because of this, the Marquis harbored resentment towards the emperor. However, looking at what is happening in the current timeline, that dark future is still very far from becoming a reality. At the Marquis's residence, Edgar recounts what happened between the Saint and the Viscount at 𝒶𝓃𝒃 while afternoon tea was being served. Based on the butler's story, the noble was still very impressed with Len. Ashton's character was confirmed by Edgar, with the Marquis even admitting that his irritation with the Emperor had somewhat subsided after hearing about Len. Edgar intended to remind his master why the Emperor acted as he did, but the Marquis spoke first, saying that he clearly understood that the Emperor was only protecting the best interests of his family. He knew that, but accepting it was a completely different matter. Before Edgar could respond, the Marquis's daughter, Fiona, appears. She was happy to see the butler had returned, causing Edgar to run to her in panic. Fiona reassures her that she is fine and needs to be stronger. Furthermore, she wanted to hear more about the trip to 𝒶𝓃𝒃. Edgar said that it was a memorable trip, but did not forget to remind her not to talk too casually with civilians like him. Fiona didn't mind because since childhood she was used to talking like that due to her mother's influence. She turned to her father and expressed her desire to go to 𝒶𝓃𝒃 to thank Len Ashton in person. The Marquis also wanted to do that, but Baron Lazar 𝒶𝓃𝒃 asked them to wait a little longer, so the two had to do as he said. In that case, Fiona suggested writing a letter, and her father also thought it was a good idea. However, he emphasized that they should respect the Baron's request and urged his daughter to be a little more patient. Fiona's face looked sad, but she understood her father's reason. However, in her heart, she always hoped that one day she could meet Len Ashton to express her deep gratitude. This time at �𝓃𝒃, Len was intently examining the green gem 𝒮𝓾𝓃 while everyone was asleep. According to what he observed, this super rare item seemed to be an egg. On the outside, it is covered by a shell so hard that no weapon or sword can harm it. When touched, Len can feel a source of power inside. He speculated that if he offered a large amount of magic and the horn of a great dragon to this item, it might hatch. When the creature inside the gem is born, it will likely swear absolute loyalty to its master. According to what Len remembers from the game's plot mentions that inside the gem hides an extremely powerful monster, so much so that even the Demon King has difficulty dealing with it. What's more remarkable is that no one in the game has found a way to hatch this gem or discover its true purpose. Finally, the super rare item is only used as an item in exchange for cash. At that moment, there was a knock on Len's door. Then Lisha opened the door slightly, looked in, and said she wanted to talk to him for a while. The princess noticed that Len was examining the pearl again. Len then explains that this item came from Chief Wolven and was brought by his parents when they came to �𝓃𝒃. Because inside the 𝒮𝓾𝓃𝒃 gem there is said to be an extremely powerful monster, Len decides to keep it, especially since this item cannot be destroyed. Lisha then asks how long Len will stay at �𝓃𝒃. He frankly replied that he planned to leave soon because his body had recovered quite a bit. Hearing that, Lisha couldn't hide her disappointment and tried to persuade him to stay longer. But Len, slow to understand, did not realize what she meant. She mentioned that the Baron had asked him to stay in his current room, but Len only replied that he needed to work. This time, Lisha became even more frustrated and finally frankly asked him to stay longer. Len saw her sincerity and immediately agreed to stay at �𝓃𝒃 for a while longer. During this time, Len and Lisha established the habit of practicing fencing every day. Occasionally, he even went shopping with her. He even chose a beautiful suit for himself. One day, a royal knight visited �𝓃𝒃 to test Lycia's fencing skills, as this was a rare opportunity. Knight Vios invited Len to participate, as the leader of the royal knights would directly inspect. This knight is famous for his fighting style, holy sword technique, founded by Ruin, the hero. Knights often learn not only basic swordsmanship, but also practice a sword style that suits them. The holy sword technique is one of the most popular styles in this world. There are many sword schools that use it, and if you master a technique, you can activate combat skills in exchange for magical energy. However, those who do not possess natural skills often use sword techniques as an alternative. Len vaguely remembered a few techniques from his time playing the game, but he doubted the possibility of activating them simply by copying. Lord Vios revealed that he focused on royal swordsmanship, as it was incompatible with the holy sword techniques of the Holy Knights. Len thought that the royal style of swordsmanship suited 𝑉𝒽oS very well because it was a swordsmanship that focused on protection. The Sword of Protection. Len expressed his desire to learn royal swordsmanship for 𝒮𝓽𝓃𝒾𝓃𝒹 development. Knight 𝑉𝒽oS is also willing to teach him this style next time. Speaking of which, Len remembered that 𝒮𝓃𝒾𝓃𝒹 in the game was excellent with the Holy Sword technique. This style is both strong in both defense and attack, and also provides good support, making users become comprehensive swordsmen. In this world, swordsmen are ranked based on strength, and 𝒮𝓃 ranked second with the title of Sword Saint. She is only one level below the highest title, High Sword King. Sword King is a title given to someone who perfectly combines all styles of swordsmanship, and in history only 5 people have achieved this position. While talking about swordsmanship, Len asked Mr. 𝑉𝒽oS if he had ever tried learning other styles of swordsmanship. 𝑉𝒽oS replied that he had studied 𝒾𝓃, the great sword technique. However, without natural talent, it is difficult to master it, which explains why only a few people can practice 𝒾𝓃. Len recalls 𝒾𝓃, the sword technique created by the Lion King, Leomel's ancestor in the game. This is a special technique used only by enemies belonging to the Imperial faction. Swordsmanship and skill are 2 different concepts. In the game, players cannot easily learn them. The technique that 𝑉𝒽oS is talking about stands out with great attack and defense capabilities, but players cannot learn it. Remembering all this made Len hate 𝒾𝓃 users because not only were they strong, but they also guaranteed instant death damage. Upon arriving at the yard, 𝑉𝒽oS and Len saw 𝒮𝓃 and the Imperial Knights training. The princess was happy to see Len and invited him to join her in training. However, Len pointed out that he came to observe. At this time, a knight in the Imperial Guard spoke up and invited Len to join, saying that he had heard a lot about Len from the princess. According to her, Len has promising talent, which is also recognized by both Saint Nu and 𝑉𝒽oS. Therefore, he wanted to see Len's abilities directly, and he gave him the sword. Len agreed and they started fighting. The knights and princesses watched together. After a few moves, the older man urged Len to fight in his own style and stop imitating their techniques. Len was confused. He admitted that he may have applied his gaming habits, specifically Sword Saint techniques, to his current style. When the man gave permission, Len changed his stance and attacked strongly. The captain of the King's Guard did not appear worried, although he was a little surprised. He quickly defeated Len with a single strike, but Len was able to stop it at the last minute. The man attempted to break through Len's defenses, but Len maintained his position, even under attack. The knight relaxed, and he asked Len's name. Then the knight revealed that the Sword Saint technique was not suitable for him. Everyone was surprised, especially 𝒮𝓃. Despite Len's obvious strength, the knight points out that the problem is one of suitability. As Len has developed some habits while training with his father, Len's fighting style is both fierce and fierce. However, according to the knight, Len's innate personality would hinder his ability to learn the Sword Saint technique. The good news is that this problem can still be fixed, but for Len, it will make it difficult for him to use the sword if he learns the Sword Saint technique. The knight cannot guarantee that Len will master the fighting skills, so it is better for him not to learn this technique, to avoid developing bad habits. Len quickly acknowledged the knight's comment and asked if he could just learn the basics of swordsmanship, and the knight was willing to teach him. The practice session is over, when one of the knights asked his commander why he said that to Len. Len cannot use the Sword Saint technique. The old knight only said that he had realized early on that Len had talent for a different type of swordsmanship. Meanwhile, Len and 𝒮𝓃 were chatting in his room. Len asked the princess if she would like to study with the knight captain, and the princess replied that she just felt normal. Len wondered why she became irritable in the middle of class, and he pointed out that she had a habit of playing with her hair when she was sad. The princess was surprised because she didn't know she had such a habit, but it turned out Len was just joking. However, her reaction now admitted that she was sad before. 𝒮𝓃 finally admitted that she was upset by what the knight said to Len. Len didn't mind too much, at least now he knew, so he wouldn't have to waste time and effort learning that technique. Len told her not to worry about him and should focus more on herself. 𝒮𝓃 then shared that the captain of the Knights team pointed out that she had similar habits to Len. After all, she relearned his techniques and tactics to defeat him. This caused her to develop similar habits. Luckily, the knight said that 𝒮𝓃's habit could still be fixed. But she didn't like the idea. To her, it was like being told that her goal of defeating Len was wrong. Len advised her to worry about herself instead of him. but Lycia also had fun learning other sword techniques. She realized there was no need to try to learn holy sword techniques. There might be another school of swordsmanship that suited her better. Len was silent, thinking that he knew for sure that the princess would master the sword technique she was learning. At that moment, the princess decided to turn the question back to him. If they told you that the techniques your father taught were unnecessary, would you agree? Len thought for a moment. But before he could answer, Lycia knew that they were all the same. However, Len points out that he is just the son of a country knight, so he is free to learn other sword techniques. And Lycia is Saintess of White. The princess said she was under no obligation to obey it. Her father always encouraged her to learn freely and find the path she wanted to follow. She also wants to live freely and become a worthy person in the future, in memory of her late mother. If she sets out to correct her ingrained habits and finds it difficult to do so, then Lycia will feel like her time has been wasted. In the end, it would be better to start learning another style of swordsmanship from scratch, which would help her develop more. Hearing her say that, Len realized that Lycia was an independent person, and not a character in the game. Having finished speaking, he promised to help her find a suitable sword school, but Lycia corrected her, saying that it was their swordsmanship style,